Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our webinar this morning. It's entitled Catchly Becoming a Cloud-First Healthcare Provider. My name's John Davis, and I look after the healthcare business for Amazon Web Services for the UK and Ireland. I'm joined today with Mark Shaw, who's one of our enterprise account managers within the healthcare and genomics teams. We've pulled together a short agenda for you guys today, which we hope will have some kind of meaning. The idea really is to baseline around what we see as required knowledge to really consume cloud services in the healthcare environment in a really healthy way. So that agenda is around who are AWS and what we're doing in healthcare, what's the relevance here for you guys. Also achieving security and compliance in the cloud for healthcare workloads, which is consistently a starting conversation for everyone concerned. And an approach to migration, first example candidate workloads, how do you go about planning effectively to make sure that you have a successful cloud journey? And finally, how to buy. Consistently stalls in projects and challenges that we see are very much around procurement routes, which are still in some way evolving to meet the needs of a digital economy. Okay, so moving straight into it, we're going to run 3 polls for you guys today. So they'll come up at different sections, which will be really good to get some input from you all. Amazon being very much a feedback-based organisation, we're keen to see that what we're communicating with you guys is really relevant and on topic. So please do spend a few seconds giving us your feedback, and we'll make sure that we take that into account in the future. Also, if you have any questions, please do type them into the screen. We'll collect everything. We'll make an effort to respond to everything. If we can't do it within the time allotted today, we'll do our best to follow up in the next day or so. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the topic itself. So I guess, the reason that we've built out our healthcare team in the UK so much was very much, what we saw as receptivity in the market. So back in January 2018, the policy was finally released by NHS Digital, DHSC and NHSE for the use of public cloud for healthcare data. I mean, that's still only 18 months old, so people are still analysing that, understanding how it applies with different regulations. Amazon as an organisation, we very much take feedback from the market. We're interested in what our customers think, what their desires are. And when we became aware that the public cloud policy was going to be released by DHSC, NHSE and NHSD, we organised some efforts around that, made some investments to make sure that we could service that market as best required. So around that, we built out a model which we see as pretty much representative of the different needs of the customers within the healthcare environment in the UK today. Those 4 pillars that we've grown out around are genomics, clinical research, arm's length bodies, so regulatory and one-to-many large-scale web workloads, provider services, and this is what it says on the tin, it's geographical alignment around the commissioning and provider units that are across the UK, not just within the NHS, but also within the private sector as well. And finally, the bit that I think often brings it all together is the health tech. And what we mean by that is systems and ISV providers and partners range from small startups with great ideas for digital innovations that are going to change the world in the future, but also right the way through the middle ground with established mid-tier such as Babylon, right up through major global players such as EMIS, Cerner, Orion, etc. The reason that we've approached those in different ways is because there's different ability to adopt cloud, there's different use cases, and there's different skills required to service those markets. For example, in genomics and clinical research, you're probably already dealing with NoSQL databases, non-relational. You've got incredibly large data sets that really do suit a cloud workspace. And it's key that we can have scientific conversations with that community as well, not just developer and executive ones. So we've built out a team that can specifically service the needs of that community. And the arm's length bodies, they tend to be developer heavy, one-to-many web workload. They're ready to adopt at scale and can see immediate benefits both on cost saving and ability to interoperate with other agencies. Only the provider services, these are the people on the point of care, they need to show innovation, they need to reduce budgets. And there's also a lot of desire to consolidate data center or reduce physical asset, given the pressures that are on hospitals for real estate in general and to reduce cost. The health tech environment obviously fits across all of those, and it's very hard in my mind to imagine a world where in 5 years' time that people running large-scale population sequencing genomics initiatives don't need to have intrinsic relationships with health tech providers around primary and acute care records, all of which will be governed by the arm's length bodies and delivered by those in the provider services. We think that ecosystem is a cohesive unit that if we deliver against the individual customer goals, we can make sure that the whole is served fully. Clear trends have started to emerge within that. Some of the use cases that are most obvious and relevant to cloud. Within population health, the benefits are clear. It's large scale analytics, use of AI and ML services. Then we've seen an awful lot of activity around digital innovation, so clinical front door type applications, both cost reduction and clinical triage. Also interoperability and data sharing. We'll touch on a couple of use cases shortly. But underpinning all of that is the need to govern, manage and secure that data, make sure that people are doing so in a responsible way. So a quick dive in on some of those adoption pillars would be Pop Health. Good examples of that would be either with Orion or Cerner's Healthy Data Lab. On the Interop and CoLab side, we've seen NHS Digital deliver the DPS and DAE environments, which is the data processing service and the data access environment. We then have smaller innovative companies such as BlackPair, specialising around Interop as well as integrated care. And also we see a lot of movement now in the refactoring of applications, going from legacy applications being migrated into cloud native format. At NHS Digital have specifically an application called Texas that does that in a controlled, managed way. As well as that, we've seen a lot of customer-facing or clinical-facing improvements. One of those we probably call out is the work that Kainos did with One Gloucestershire around providing a unified clinical view from disparate data sources. Also within the clinical front door space, we saw NHS BSA, Business Services Authority, deliver an automated chatbot and cloud-based call center service that provides advice on EHIC or European Health Insurance Card renewals and 10 other services. That one service alone has shown a 40% reduction in contact through to physical or human assets within the call center and a cost benefit of over 500k on that single service alone. As we said, underlying all that is security. A good example of that was when NHS Business Services Authority again enabled AWS Guard Duty. Within 4 days of that service going live, they were detecting inbound attacks not previously identifiable with their traditional methods. So diving a little more into security, it's always job zero with AWS, and it certainly is with healthcare providers as well. Fundamental principle of the AWS public cloud is a shared responsibility model. The idea of that is that AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. We're responsible for protecting the infrastructure that runs the services, the hardware, the software, the networking, and also the physical access to the facilities that run these services. Our customers or partners are responsible for securing the data of the security in the cloud. So customer responsibility is determined by the AWS cloud services that a customer selects. This determines the amount of configuration work the customer must perform as part of the security responsibilities. A good example of that is up to and including the hypervisor is secure, protected, patched, and managed by us for a virtual machine. But if you're using something such as managed relational databases or RDS, then we would include, for example, in a SQL environment, we would also include the management of that database service as well. So there's still occasionally confusion on what can be put in the AWS cloud for different workloads, and obviously the discussion today is bespoke to AWS cloud. NHS digital guidance requires healthcare organisations to make sure that they've satisfied themselves, the cloud provider they've selected, to implement the required controls to manage that risk. I guess the question, is how do they quantify that? So, as I've said, AWS security is job zero. It's demonstrated from our security and compliance certifications, which are accessible by you via the AWS console. As a customer, you benefit from a data center and network architecture that's built to meet the requirements of the most security sensitive organizations in the world. Dave Rogers at Ministry of Justice, during an interview recently, stated that, quite frankly, cloud is an opportunity to enhance your security posture as opposed to something you need to worry about too much. I think more and more organizations are starting to learn that if they use all the tools and the services available to them, it can be a real benefit over what they have today. We should also call out that AWS as a provider meets the requirements of NHS Digital's Data Security and Protection Toolkit. The Security and Protection Toolkit is classified in various ways, but AWS has a rating of standards exceeded. We also have aggregation via partners to multiple HSCN routes if your application isn't operating on an internet-first basis. So in combination, I think, with your own risk assessments and the increased security posture that AWS can offer, there's no reason why any healthcare workload can't be moved to the cloud. I've personally been involved in many of the security and governance conversations that have happened between multiple agencies that make the decisions on these things. And whilst there's often some devil to be worked out in the detail, at no point yet have we come across one that can't be managed effectively. Amazon Web Services can improve your security and help lower the risk. The sheer scale at which we operate means you make these benefits. Our size means we can afford to manage that risk well, and the way we operate enables us to share this benefit with all of you at a reasonable cost. The most demanding in the intelligence community, all the way through to the smallest with the least resources, you get exactly the same platform. For this reason, it's actually possible to be more secure, generally speaking, in the cloud than it would be in an on-premise data center. Moving on, we should also cover data residency, which under the risk framework that we touched on before from NHS Digital and DHSC is called out as vastly preferable. Whilst there are caveats around European Economic Area and countries with Privacy Shield, we've made sure that pretty much all workloads can be adequately serviced from the AWS London or UK region. How this works is that a region within AWS is not necessarily the same terminology as it is with other companies. A region has a number of availability zones. Specifically within the UK region or London, we have 3 availability zones. An availability zone is a disparate set of data center assets. So on your screen at the minute, the left-hand box is showing a region. The right-hand box is showing a blowout of one of those availability zones within the region. Certain services, such as our storage ones, make sure that they spread the data across all of those 3 by default, making sure you have access to 11 nines of durability as a default at very, very affordable rates. But also within those availability zones, we make sure that they are all standards set by, and ready for audit purposes. So they're a meaningful distance apart, which means they have a disparate risk profile. They don't share the same power main, network ring, or anything else that could cause more than one to go down at the same time. But by the same token, we make sure they're near enough to provide synchronous replication between the different availability zones. This means that it enables you to design highly available architecture, similar to what we ourselves use at Amazon, or is also used by Netflix, Airbnb, and the like. So tuning that back into the NHS digital document that was provided earlier in 2018, there's clear guidance on that, and there's some very useful models at which you can use to assess both your data set and how you consume the cloud at large. We thought it would be helpful to actually tune that and make a document or an artifact that allows you to go through and see how that is used specifically for AWS, rather than just go with general recommendations. Some of the guidance for public cloud is quite clear, but fundamentally the responsibility still rests with providers to assess the risk and satisfy yourselves that the chosen provider has implemented the required controls to ensure the security of the cloud. That's the selection of that cloud provider. But as we discussed earlier, AWS invests significantly in our security and compliance programs to ensure that we meet the requirements of the world's most security conscious organizations. These should give you the confidence that the way we operate our cloud infrastructure meets and exceeds the requirements for hosting patient data in the UK. Reflecting back to the AWS shared security model, customers are responsible for their security in the cloud. That means the part of the data you manage, who you give access to, and when and where you do so. We have produced this white paper to provide some detailed guidance for all NHS organisations to help you understand how to utilise a wide range of AWS services and security tools to meet these 14 principles that are outlined in that cloud document guidance from NHS. A link to this white paper will be mailed out to you after this webinar. So the way we've organised that is within the white paper, we've done it in the context of that NHS Cloud Security Guidance. It goes into depth and it helps you understand how the various services available on AWS can be used to meet those principles. Those principles are originally set out by the National Cybersecurity Centre. Security portfolio can be summarised there, but in short, it covers user authentication, audit logging, firewalls and network access controls, data encryption, which is AES 256, both at rest and in transit. As well as that, there's incident support and response and management tools included. Beyond that, there's other help at hand. We appreciate that many organisations doing this just because of the nature of the amount of time you've been allowed to put healthcare data on the cloud means that some jump starts are helpful. One of the ones that we've developed or evolved from its previous use with other organisations and other industries is the AWS landing zone solution. Everything in the cloud exists as infrastructure as code, which I guess means that you can effectively template your data center and deploy your AWS resources, have them instantly and automatically comply with your protocols, your governance standards, and those security principles. This approach is captured in or encapsulated in a landing zone. It's relevant to most of the principles covered by the Good Practice Guide, and the landing zone is a solution that automatically creates an environment consisting of a set of related AWS accounts configured in such a way as to establish security, cost-related guardrails for AWS usage. This can be applied to a large amount of teams with different requirements, and its design is really to reduce friction. The environment includes foundations of identity management, logging, monitoring, governance, security, and network design. We have specifically baked in some of the healthcare compliance considerations for the UK into these. Our professional services and our solutions architecture teams can talk you through these at point of need. Specifics of all of these may be implemented and configured using decisions which make meeting each of the 14 security principles viable. As well as things like landing zones, when you're given some consideration to or in the process of migrating key clinical applications, another artifact we would recommend is something called an AWS well-architected review. That's where we would either provide documentation for you to do this yourselves, or as a partner or with a partner, or use one of our own solutions architects or professional services, healthcare specific staff to run through this framework. The framework is based on 5 pillars that go everything from resilience, cost effectiveness, optimization, performance, and security, and make sure that you have got reasoned, RAG coded, red, amber, green coded feedback on each aspect of your application so that you can thoroughly test it and make sure that migration is done in a measured manner at scale, following the best practices learned over 13 years of enterprise cloud migration. I guess at this point it's probably good, before we segue into migration, to introduce the second poll. This one's called this one's about how you would define your current business cloud usage. If you could take a few seconds just to give that some thought and give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate it. Just at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark Shaw. He's one of our enterprise account managers working within the arm's length bodies and genomics space. He's going to look at some of the first case use cases and migration approaches.
Everyone, hi, as John just mentioned, my name's Mark Shaw. I've been working in healthcare for 20 years now, but over the last 4 years in AWS, I've been working with NHS trusts, arm's length bodies and health techs move to AWS cloud. So over the next few slides, I just wanted to talk to you through some of my experiences of healthcare organisations when they're migrating to AWS. I'm going to touch upon some typical migration drivers and patterns of migration to move to cloud. I'm also going to touch on some real-world examples of a migration in the NHS, as well as some typical first candidate workloads or quick wins for NHS trusts and health techs to consider. So across all industries who are adopting cloud, we tend to see common migration drivers from customers who are making the move. But we're now seeing these drivers across healthcare as they become more and more relevant across the NHS and the health tech sectors in the UK. The primary drivers we're starting to see are increase in business agility. Some of our customers are creating business cases where they believe their workforce can be 30 to 70% more productive and deliver features and new services much faster as a result of migrating their skills and applications to the cloud. We're also seeing data center consolidation. We're seeing this across multiple projects, especially in healthcare companies that have been active with acquisitions and have experienced infrastructure sprawl over the years. But we're also now seeing this across the NHS as integrated care systems, SDPs, etc., start to look at introducing new services across their regions. It's also well documented that the NHS is pursuing innovation and digital transformation. And we're seeing organisations, like John mentioned, the NHS Business Services Authority introduce chatbots in their call centre. But we're also seeing this across health tech companies as well, such as EMIS and Cerner, who are looking to completely re-image their business using modern technology as part of a larger digital transformation project and innovation. And most of all, we're seeing organisations looking to reduce cost. All organisations are cost conscious and are looking for ways to improve the bottom line by reducing the costs, and moving to cloud reduces the reliance on capital budgets. There may be other additional drivers like acquisitions, facility decisions, or co-location contract changes driving migrations to the cloud of health techs. However, we are seeing high performance compute projects and data analytics projects across NHS start to open up new data sets for researchers, and NHS Digital's data provider services is a great example of this. Now, as customers journey to the cloud, typically we see 4 key phases for adoption. Phase 1, early in the journey, customers are in the project phase where they're running specific projects to experience benefits from the cloud. And typically AWS is evaluated and vetted on a project by project basis. After experiencing the benefits of cloud, customers then build foundation to scale their cloud adoption. This includes creating a landing zone, a cloud center of excellence, operation models, and security and compliance readiness models. AWS becomes a proven choice and is often used for new projects. Customers then move to migration phase where they migrate existing applications, including mission critical applications or entire data centers to the cloud as they look to scale their adoption across a growing portfolio of IT services. And then the end stage of the journey is the reinvention phase. In this stage, with operations in the cloud, customers tend to focus on reinvention, taking advantage of the flexibility and capabilities of AWS to transform their services and businesses, and increasing speed and time to market for innovation. Over time, as we've seen customers move through these 4 stages, we have created mechanisms to accelerate the customer journey. The Migration Assistance Program, or MAP, was created to help accelerate migration by bringing a customer through the foundation, building and migration phases, both building capability and capturing value from migrations. Today, we see most organizations have these 2 distinct paths to the next generation of infrastructure. And in the last few years, we finally see a deliberate effort from our customers to focus on enterprise migration planning and mass migration. Now, MAP is unique in the industry, and it's based on the experience of AWS migrating many customers from many industries across the globe to AWS. MAP provides an outcome-driven methodology with AWS and its partner system. It provides consultant support, training, and AWS service credits to accelerate and reduce the risk of migrations, build a strong operational foundation, and help offset the initial costs of migrations. So if you're moving workloads to the cloud at scale, you should certainly consider using MAP from AWS. Now, assessing the customer's application portfolio and determining the application migration pattern for all applications is a critical success in the migration of planning and execution. Once some basic discovery and assessment has been done, each application migration tends to follow one of 6 different paths. So we've built a migration model built upon the 5 R's that Gartner coined in 2011. We're going to outline 6 of them, and they include rehosting. So the simplest approach is to rehost or lift and shift your application into the cloud. And this often represents half or more of the customer's environment, typically leveraging tools that automate the process. As customers progress through their migrations, we often find them starting with re-architecting applications as the default approach, but then shift more and more to rehost to accelerate their migration and capture business benefits. This then transforms their environment over time. When customers look to re-platform, some applications require modifications to address specific challenges or provide key benefits, such as reducing licensing costs as they move them to the cloud. When we see customers repurchasing, a lot of customers are starting to move towards a SaaS model. When we see customers refactoring, in some cases, you might want to completely reimagine your application architecture and skip right towards state-of-the-art leveraging the broader set of container-based serverless and managed NoSQL offerings in the market. So we typically see customers start to build cloud-native applications. From a retirement point of view, we typically, don't see we see environments from customers where they don't know what they're going to find until they look under the hood. So it's common for us to find that no one knows what 20 to 20% of the enterprise IT portfolio actually does, and it can simply be switched off. But then finally, we want to call out the emergence of a new R in our model, which is relocate, and that's been made possible to quickly relocate applications based upon VMware and AWS and container technologies to quickly move environments to AWS with minimal effort and complexity. So we're seeing adoption of cloud across the NHS, and Healthy Lancashire and South Cumbria has embarked on a partnership with AWS through our APM partner ANS. ANS are based in the northwest of England and are a locally based managed services cloud provider. The first workload that was identified to lift and shift to the cloud was Lancashire's Health Information Exchange, known as LPRESS, so the Lancashire Person Record Exchange. ANS worked with AWS ProServe to create a landing zone for the first workloads to create the appropriate guide rails and put them in place for further AWS adoption to give them the ability to bring on more workloads quickly and efficiently. The second workload, which was actually refactored to run natively in the AWS cloud, was WellPress. So WellPress is an application focused on improving patient efficiency within 3 main cancer outpatient clinics across the region. But the team is also looking at AWS artificial intelligence and machine learning services, such as Amazon Recognition, and they're using these to look at how we might identify patients with dementia, but they're also looking at medical comprehend to assist them in deriving value from insights from unstructured documents. But they've also developed a proof of concept that shows how comprehend medical can spot missing medication on discharge notices. So as a healthcare organisation, how can we get started? Well, maybe we could start looking at data. It's a simple workload. Healthcare provider data is growing in size year on year as we introduce new big data sets such as genomic data, introduce new digital services such as digital pathology, and start to look at new analytical tools to gain deeper insights into population health data. Healthcare organizations will be able to better manage and secure data when it's in the cloud. Healthcare providers are responding to these demands by leveraging AWS to enforce lifecycle management, employ cost-effective, scalable storage, and unburden data for operational and quality insights. Some of the benefits of moving your data to the cloud include using new analytical tools to link up and build new population data sets to improve health needs and revenue lifecycle management capabilities. optimize data archival for healthcare governance and compliance, elevate enterprise backup and disaster recovery performance, evolve storage for scanned medical records and images, and this allows easier management of internal and external image sharing across all organizations, and finally enforce data lifecycle management with storage cost optimization. So most importantly, once a healthcare provider migrates data to the cloud, you effectively unlock its potential. It gives you the option of utilizing a range of AWS services that can really start to power your digital transformation. Migrating your data into AWS is the launch point for taking advantage of services such as AI and machine learning, but also creating a data lake and automatically catalog all of your data regardless of the format for use in advanced analytics to drive new insights in care. And our fine-grained security controls in our storage services provide healthcare organizations with the confidence and the controls to share relevant data with other services through regional health information exchanges or participation with research bodies. And our second example of a first step into cloud is through VMware. Most NHS and UK-based healthcare providers will be familiar with VMware tools and will be more than likely running them on-premise. However, very few are aware that VMware and AWS have collaborated to integrate use of AWS Cloud as part of your software-defined data center. So VMware and AWS offers UKIR region support for keeping workloads sovereign to the UK. VMware software-defined data center running natively on AWS infrastructure, direct access to native AWS services to complement your VMware environment, support for containers and virtual machines, on-demand capacity and flexible consumption, and full operational consistency with on-premise software-defined data center, and finally, seamless workload portability from on-prem into the cloud in minutes. And we've already seen NHS and other healthcare organisations in the UK start to adopt VMware or AWS, and we're seeing these across three main scenarios. So in scenario one, we're seeing consolidating data center footprints and maintaining primary data center functionality on premise, but using AWS Cloud for backup and disaster recovery purposes. In scenario two, we're seeing healthcare data lakes being built and expanded into AWS to take advantage of cloud-based analytics, machine learning, and AI services that are just not currently available on premise. And finally, in scenario three, having the ability to burst compute workloads from on-premise into the cloud for additional capacity is providing new capabilities to healthcare research organizations who run compute-heavy workloads. So VMware and AWS is a cost-effective way for NHS and healthcare organizations to move to the cloud. Organizations with existing VMware skills do not need to retrain technical teams to use AWS Cloud, as they can manage VMware on AWS workloads by the existing VMware tooling that organizations are used to and currently have the skill sets in their organization. So just before I hand you back over to John, we're just going to run into poll 3. So it'd be appreciated if you could just answer the question that's popping up in the poll at this moment in time.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that run through there, some interesting use cases and approaches. So, I mean, I guess to sort of bring this home, we wanted to touch a bit on how to buy, procurement routes, mechanisms and methods. I think even for my own journey, which is probably 3.5 years into Amazon Web Services now, it's been one of the most consistently misunderstood topics around cloud, especially within healthcare. It's one of the most significant project holdups that we see, in that everyone's on board, they understand why they want to use cloud, they get the fundamental reasons and the benefits of doing so, but then they come to procure it and they try to buy a cloud in exactly the way that they would have bought traditional hardware infrastructure, and it tends to cause holdups and problems. So we'll run through a few tips and tricks that we've learned over the years on this. Okay, so first of all, let's just refresh on what becoming a cloud-first healthcare provider means. What are the benefits that you're going to realize that? Because getting them into a solid strategy business case is really fundamental to realizing those benefits. It's a move from CapEx to OpEx, which generally speaking, if you manage it well, is going to be appealing to CFOs once that change is managed and appropriate guardrails have been put in place. It should give the business more flexibility, more accountability in what they use, and absolutely will reduce wasted resource allocation. The ability to tear down and iterate. So often, we've got some brilliant people in the NHS. I myself worked there for 12 years. The chance we got to test and develop was simply not as much as it needed to be for people so close to the front line. In a cloud organization, you can build things up, you can tear them down, you can iterate, you can try things at little or no cost whatsoever. This kind of approach promotes innovation. It's innovation that we need if we're going to see the NHS thrive in the years to come. The pressures it's going to be under. Also, the benefits of large-scale economies, that even though there's been several collaborations between trusts to buy collectively, we've never really seen on the scale of opportunity that public cloud presents. The inherent price reductions that those give. At a fundamental level, Amazon is very comfortable as a high volume, low margin organization. Whenever we can pass a saving on, we will. To date, that's resulted in 75 different price reductions. So try and avoid things being built into your tenders such as fixed prices, fixed outcome. Those are a legacy of the past. In the modern world, you should be able to benefit continuously on that scale that you're adopting into. So I guess the other thing that you should be conscious of is removal of undifferentiated heavy lifting. Nobody opens a hospital to specialize in the management of data centers, but as a technology company, it's core to what we do. So if we can share some of that with you guys and learn from some of you around clinical provision in the process, that's a pretty good deal from our point of view. I think, the removal of need to make multi-year guesses on infrastructure investments is really key for us as well. Okay, so why is that cloud contract different as such? Why can't you just scrub out the word data center and import the word cloud or public cloud into it? I think it's making sure you manage the contract effectively, that you get the benefits out of it that are there. By doing the same thing, you just can't do that. Fundamentally, as a hyperscale cloud provider with millions of active customers using our services daily, we can't be bespoke to every individual customer. The minute we do, we lose our inherent value to you, which we defined before as being that high margin, low volume organization. All of the things that appeal to you about using AWS Cloud are lost the day we try and do an individual contract for each different organization that we contract with. Getting comfortable with self-service is a really fundamental part of that. This means that you pull services when you need them. Examples of some things to consider that don't generally work contractually for public cloud, no matter who you're dealing with, would be a portion of responsibility for acceptance testing, change management, customer enforced maintenance windows, or the return or destruction of materials. All of those things can and will be done. You can engage partners to do so too, to do so for you if you don't have on-site skills to do that. But they shouldn't be a part of what's requested from the provision of the public cloud itself. You should also be conscious of backup of applications in the cloud and really understanding what that means on an application by application basis. A good example of that is where we use S3, which is our storage service, or even the deep archive services. We give you by default 11 nines of durability. That means, on average, you might lose, if you store 10,000 documents in the cloud, you may lose one every million years. It's a fairly robust mechanism for ensuring that you've got the availability to be able to see that data. That said, it's not the same as a backup of an application. It won't understand the way your application works, what steps need to be done to bring that back online. But because we operate that highly available architecture, it means the opportunity to do so is there. We can engage with solution architects in AWS that can help you make sure you're following best practice for this, or even advise you on how that might work for you as an individual organization. Good example of that is NHS Digital's Texas program. They followed something they'd seen at one of our summits around a process Netflix using kill scripts or kill bots to take out virtual instances at random and make sure that they can survive that level of infrastructure drop-in. If you can, there's a pretty good chance your application is going to stay up. You can do so obviously in a safe, ring-fenced environment without really putting that into production at first. The other thing that we really try and guard against, I've said it once already, but still just to stress, fixed pricing of services, it removes the benefit of the cloud of the price reductions that you'll see over time. So I think key considerations moving forward, invest in your own education, but also that as stakeholders such as procurement and finance. So often we engage heavily with IT and infrastructure teams, even business intelligence teams, and really put loads of effort in. They go on the training courses, they make sure that they've got the digital skills required to deliver. But procurement and finance haven't necessarily been brought along on the journey, so we definitely make sure that you include those guys in that. And we do have mechanisms we can support you with on that. We have capture and proposals teams that are experienced working with CCS, G-Cloud and other framework mechanisms. They can share some of those learnings with you guys and make sure that when you do an ITT or RFX that you're getting, asking the right questions in the right way to make sure that you don't lock yourself out of any of the benefits cloud can bring. Also, make sure your cloud strategy is clear, really aligns to the business goals that you've set. One of the sort of catchphrases we use a lot on this is try to be stubborn on the vision, flexible on the details. In a modern digital environment such as public cloud enables, change is a positive, it's an opportunity, it's a chance to improve, to be agile. Using things like COTS services such as are available. Mark touched on Comprehend Medical before, which is an AI service that allows any developer to spot clinical text within message, take actions on it, either identify or de-identify clinical terms within that data or personally identifiable information. When you're using things like that, that's a service you're consuming from AWS, which means we will develop that service over time. It may support more ontologies, SNOMED CT or ICD as time moves on, and you want to be able to take advantage of those. Yet so often still we see contracts come out or RFX come out that actually define services must remain for the period of contract as they are on the day of bid. That really locks you out of the key benefits of moving cloud in the first place, so please do be conscious of that. Also, try and separate expectations on procurements between managed and unmanaged services. If you need a managed service, there are fantastic partners out there that can really, have loads of years of experience on AWS services, some of them within healthcare as well, and really help you build and hold your hand through the early stage of the process. Make sure that you engage those in the managed service way, but don't try and apply that managed service wrap to an unmanaged service provision. Invest early in understanding security best practice and leverage the partner tools and services available for that. Make sure that guardrails that are meaningful for your business are in place that allow innovation to be fostered but manage corporate risk appetite, which will vary from an org to org point of view. So how do partners fit? AWS break partners into a few different buckets. I think there's the ISV partners, and that's the fairly obvious ones, and that could be anything from Cerner to EMIS and various other people who are providing a product that is hosted on the AWS cloud. Moving on from that, there's then resellers, system integrated and managed service providers. If you need help on that initial cloud journey, whether that's data center assessment or the ability to manage support environments going forward, or even resellers who can really help you optimize that pricing engagement, making sure that you follow healthy practices as you migrate or go through your cloud journey. Public sector customers often require a cloud provider for their infrastructure. They may use a number of different providers. Certainly, some of our more mature organizations use anything up to 20 different partners as part of that operation. If you're likely to need support for your solution design and architecture in the cloud, or that dev and support, make sure you engage with us and we can advise on partners that have been really successful in that area already. So how to buy, the simple bit, right? So you can go and get it off G-Cloud, go onto Digital Marketplace, search for the things that you're interested in. Not only do we have the ability for you to consume that directly via G-Cloud, but also there's an awful lot of partners that can sell AWS services through G-Cloud. Also, if you prefer an indirect model, we are now available on NHS Shared Business Services Cloud Solutions Framework. There are 11 different partners, all of which that are already relevant and present within the UK healthcare IT ecosystem. Or give us a call, drop us a note on the contact link at the end, and we're happy to engage in conversations around who specialises with what. Moving on, finally, Mark touched on it, but we should probably really call out, in terms of first steps, the agreement NHS Digital released, performed recently with VMware. That's VMware on AWS. And Mark discussed VMware as a good example of how many healthcare organizations can take the first steps into AWS and use your existing skills, deployment models. NHS Digital recently performed some on-stage live migrations with VMware in a roadshow series of teams from Digital, literally vMotion servers from on-premise into VMware live on stage. It really is that simple, and it's very easy to set up demos for this. So if you've got a compelling event such as a data center closure or things that need to move quickly and fast, VMware and AWS is a really, really strong proposition in that area. Digital themselves are now moving many of their workloads to cloud using VMware and AWS, and then modernizing them to use AWS native services as a part of that process. They have that agreement with VMware to provide NHS organizations with discounted access, so that would apply to you guys too. As summarizing everything, we don't think there's ever been a better time to start your cloud journey. Nobody has to be first in healthcare anymore. Most things have been done already. You get to be first to be second. So if that's appealing to you guys, give us a shout. We're going to roll on, and we're going to try and answer any questions that have come up in the remaining time. But mostly I'd just like to thank you all for your time and attention over the last hour. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and please do reach out if we can support in any way. Thank you very much. Just to say, if you do have any further questions, please do drop them in the question window. We'll be available for the next 10 minutes to try and answer those for you. Thank you.
Hi, we've had one question come through, which is, does the NHS Digital pricing model include reserved instances? We're not in a position to answer that at this moment in time, just simply because the VMware and AWS agreement is licensed using VMware licensing models. So what we'll do is we'll take that question away, and we'll reach out to our colleagues at VMware just to understand if it includes reserved instances, or if it's already baked into the VMware licensing model. And what we'll do is we'll circulate that response to everybody who attended the call. Any more questions, then please feel free to drop them into the chat functionality, and we can pick them up. Hi, so we've got 4 minutes left of the scheduled webinar. So if there's any final questions, please feel free to share them. Otherwise, we'll be ending the call straight on the hour. Thank you. Hi, everybody. We've not had any follow-up questions, so we're going to end the recording and the call now, and we'll follow up in the next few days with the copy of the recording that will be sent out to everybody who attended. Thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you all have a great day. Thank you.